afternoon. I'm Bob Seay from WGBH News, and I cover transportation. And I welcome you to Lunch Hour Live, coming to you from our studio here at the Boston Public Library and streaming on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Now, we're interested in hearing what you think here, both at the BPL and online, so let us know and ask whatever questions you might have via email. Now, on the first Wednesday of each month, Lunch Hour Live deals with the issues of transportation. And our general subject today is how can the T better serve their riders and the communities that they live in? And joining us to talk about that this morning are Louise Baxter from the T Riders Union, Mela Miles, Director of Transit-Oriented Development at ACE, and Marvin Martin, Director of Action for Equity. Welcome to you all. All three of you, I think, received Transit Equity Awards this week from the Boston City Council. Is that true?
Yes.
We should mention this is Transit Equity Week, and partly in observance of Rosa Parks' very dramatic action that she took back in 1955, and which you celebrated yesterday on the 14 bus. Now, I'd like to begin with you, Louise, and one of the reasons I asked you here is that I attend many of the Fiscal Control Board meetings of the Mbta, and you're just about at every single one of them, and there have been like 188 of them. Have you attended every one of those meetings?
Most of them.
Most of them. And you actually sit through the whole meeting, which is amazing considering that they run 3, 4, sometimes 5 hours. Why do you do that?
Well, first when the T Riders Union, we used to go there all the time. Then we started, and I still want to keep our presence there.
The T Riders Union?
Yeah, to make sure. And sometimes I think it pays to know what's going on. You understand the complications they have.
Uh-huh.
And the other thing, and sometimes if I stay, I might have something I can share with other people to know.
Now, you usually always have a comment to make, too. You bring up an issue, and they listen to what you have to say. In general, what are the most important issues that you relate to with the T?
Well, equity, buses, maybe equity buses, fares, and I'm trying to think, make sure that the buses run better and people, fairness and equity
Yeah.
And I did advocate for the digital boards at Broadway. They put them there where they say when the next bus is coming.
Do you feel that you're listened to at these meetings?
Well, yeah, I kind of think so because some people say they saw me on live stream.
Uh-huh. and do you think the MBTA is taking your advice?
Some of it.
Some of it? Uh-huh.
Yeah, I find this board goes, and that's why I say that I think people should speak up. People are so afraid to feel so stupid and everything, but they don't realize that they might be heard.
So you encourage everyone to speak up?
Yes, I do, because we just speak up, but we don't know all the trials on the buses.
Yeah. In general, do you think the MBTA is making progress?
Yeah, I think it's making some progress, because the trouble is they don't want them spending any more money.
Mm-hmm.
They want everything cost neutral.
But that's not good. That's not able to happen, right?
So they're trying to work within that.
Right, right.
But they have advocated for more money now.
Yeah.
I mean, we are having some progress with the board.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I wanted to focus on when we talk about transit equity, and maybe Mela, I could ask you, what do we mean when we talk about transit equity?
Transit equity is actually having a system that is accessible to all, that is affordable, and that does not prioritize one group over another, and that does not manifest things like racist policies that would actually shut out certain communities from being able to access the MBTA, or just cutting out service in areas where people desperately need it. So we need things to be done in an equitable way that allows all people of all races and income levels to be able to access public transportation.
And Marvin, you're director of the group Action for Equity. So how do you talk about transit equity here in Boston?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much the same as what Melo just explained. We like to think of ourselves as trying to set policies that benefit the most vulnerable in our population, and particularly when it comes to race and class. And so that's what we kind of think of when we think of equity. But it's really, and I would say, I guess the one thing that would differ just a little bit is from Mel is when it's not as simple as making sure that one class is not being treated better than others. I think you need to actually invest more in those populations that are really transit dependent. So actually, in some ways, they benefit more than than folks other than them. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
So we're talking about, particularly in Boston, interesting story is the Fairmont line, which many people outside of Boston may not be aware of. But the Fairmont line is a commuter rail line that runs through neighborhoods that don't really have many transit options, do they?
No, well, and not rapid transit options. I mean, that was the reason why we pushed to have stops on that line. You know, when you look at a map of the Mbta rail system, and where you see where it's actually lacking is the communities of color. And so there were two efforts. One, of course, was to replace the orange line, the elevated orange line, with a rail service. You know, they gave us the silver line, which was not a rail service. And then the other effort was what we are now calling the Indigo line, which runs through the Fairmount corridor. And it, you know, the train was already there, the tracks were there. So we just say to folks, look, this is an easy one. Let's just put down, you know, create some stops, but also to be innovative about this because, you know, we didn't want this to be just another commuter rail system where people from, you know, the suburbs come downtown and go back, right? We wanted to have destination stops along the train so that the folks in those neighborhoods could now access the other neighborhood, right? And those other, so whether it's restaurants, parks, you know, the Strand Theater, Croc Center, whatever it was, that we would have easy access to all of those things. The other piece of that was, in addition to the stops, we needed more frequent service. We wanted free transfer to the rest of the system. We just recently, the Mbta board voted to add 8 new trips, something that we've been pushing for a long time. And you know, it's a pilot project, but we would imagine that it'll last because you're now, you know, folks will be able to access the train not just during peak hours, right? We actually like to see more trips, but we'll start with the 8, and then hopefully we can get the free transfer into the rest of the system.
Mm-hmm. So you are getting some transfer options with this new proposal, right?
Some.
Not full, but yeah.
Yeah.
So do you think, are you satisfied with this move, Melo, on the Fairmont line?
With the 8 new trips?
Yeah.
It's progress. Also, the Mbta has agreed to allow use of the Charlie card by adding fare validation equipment on the platforms at the station so that people can tap their Charlie card, get a validation ticket, and then get on the train with a proof of payment. Mm-hmm. And so we've been fighting since the inception and the implementation of the fare collection system of the Charlie card to make sure that when the new stations open, people would be able to access the system by way of a Charlie card like other parts of the Mbta. Why is that important? When you have folks that are using cash stored on their Charlie card, once they got to the Fairmont Indigo Line trains, they had to pay again because there was no way for that fare to be validated for them to even take that fare off of the Charlie card. so they couldn't pay. So people were deterred from using it, and then there was some statement about, oh, well, nobody's really riding it, it has low ridership. Why? It ran once an hour, there was no way to access it with the
This is the
fare media.
catch-22.
Yeah.
Nobody's riding this line, why should we invest in it?
Right. And then they said, oh, we spent all this money on it, and then no one's riding it. You did not finish what you started. We needed the vision of the Indigo line to come to full fruition. And what it had was different types of trains running on it. It was a new idea, an urban hybrid rapid transit that ran on commuter rail tracks and went through these environmental justice, lower income, transit dependent communities. So, and it served them. So we needed them to, fulfill the promise and to bring the whole vision to fruition. So here we are now. We have the Charlie cards. We have the addition of new service, more frequency. Now what the next step will be an idea that we've been pushing for different types of trains. So the T is talking about using this as a pilot of electrification. So we had been asking for different types of trains that could stop and start more quickly instead of those big, hulky, push-pull locomotives that they have, like the commuter rail trains. So those would be able to stop and start more frequently. You could add frequency. You could electrify it and lower the emissions and the pollution that is being dumped in the community with all these empty trains that run through, as well as the Fairmount Line train. So we need to clean up the air as well. So once they do that, we'll have a full Indigo vision. Not that they're ever gonna, and hopefully they'll name it Indigo, which is what we asked them to
So
do.
we have, right, the red, orange, green, blue, and indigo.
Indigo, yes.
The issue, Louise, you had talked to me before about how the neighborhoods of Boston have changed, so that people are no longer able to walk to the corner store. There are fewer stores, and in a sense require more mass transit. Is that right?
Yes. And one thing, like people, I know from the West Broadway D Street project, sometimes people complain about people putting strollers on the T, but they don't have a supermarket they have a sort of a gourmet yuppie supermarket that doesn't take WIC near them, that won't take WIC. So they have to take the bus over a mile, and people complain about the strollers on the buses. But, people didn't have them so much in the old days because you didn't have to go shopping. You didn't have to take a bus to go shopping.
But you do these days. You need more mass transit, is what you're saying.
Yes. Well, because I think on my route, like half the route they're more upper class, so it runs more often. But part of it's also the Broadway development. And still some low-income people spread about.
In terms of the MBTA hearing from its riders, this is another issue. I see you at the FMCB meetings, and I see Mela. Is there enough engagement with the public? I know the MBTA is trying to undertake a new effort. Who represents the riders, and how do they survey what riders are feeling and thinking?
What do you mean, who represents the riders?
Who represents the riders to the MBTA? How do they know what their riders are? I mean, you make an appearance and you make a specific request, but is there any formalized way that they have interaction with their riders?
Oh.
Other than social media, which can be pretty intense.
Well, they do have their Oversight Committee.
Right. Now, the Oversight Committee, there is a Riders Oversight Committee that is a bare shell of its former self. Very few people are involved. They really don't speak for a large number of riders, which I think is one of the reasons the MBTA is starting this new public engagement process later this month. I think the first meeting is February 13th at the DOT building, but they want to hear from people about how can we engage with you more to hear what you think.
They said they go out and do surveys at some of the stations, but that only gets some people, and they're in a hurry. I think even the TYs, we find it is hard to outreach, but they got to get the messages in more places, like the projects, Because and sometimes people complain, we went to one of the meetings, and they just went around tables and put your ideas, and people were saying they hope for a discussion.
You know, there's a lot of advocacy groups that work on transit, and I think, you know, the team needs to engage with them more, right? And not see us as opponents all the time, and actually recognize that we can bring a certain voice, you know, to this engagement stuff that they're talking about. Organizations like the Transit Riders Union, Action for Equity, T for Mass, Transit Matters, Livable Streets Alliance. There's a lot of groups out there that engage and have a lot of members. And so, you know, if they want to start this public engagement process, why don't you go to the advocacy groups that already have a base and say, how can you engage with us? The Oversight Committee was started with community organizations. It changed, evolved over time. But it was started, it was part of an agreement from those of us who was pushing back on that first fare hike, right? And so the fare hike did go through, but we got some agreement. It was less than they had first proposed. But one of the other agreements was to set up the Transit Riders Oversight Committee. And there were organizations like On the Move, Greater Four Corners Action Coalition. Those were the groups who made up the Oversight Committee. Then the T said, well, we should have some resident voices. And so they brought in then some residents. But then because they went through, the legislature put this new ethical thing in place, it made it difficult for the community organizations to stay on. And so we all had to leave. And that left just the residents. And as you said, you know, it's not what it used to be. Right. But at least the administration at that time recognized the benefit of having community organizations, advocacy organizations, engage in a conversation with them. But that's, again, that's how this thing was set up.
So there should be more of that, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
We also,
go ahead.
yes, we also, a number of leaders of different advocacy groups sit on different kind of committees that the MBTA has organized, whether we're talking about, whether it's like the AFC 2.0 working group that we were sitting on, which is now
it's called the automated fare collection.
Yeah, I was going to say they're now calling it fare transformation or automated fare collection 1.5, 1.0, 2.0. So they keep changing the names. So we've been having discussions with different members of the MBTA to discuss how things are being changed, whether it's looking at fare evasion fines, whether it's looking at the fare collection system that they were looking to implement. And we actually have come and made recommendations around community engagement during the public comment period at the Fiscal Management and Control Board meetings, and said that it wasn't done right. For example, they had a Title VI kind of civil rights conversation, and there was this massive rainstorm with like 2 or 3 inches per hour were falling, some bombogenesis or whatever that meteorological term is. And so they let the meeting go on, didn't cancel it. And so there were 15 people in the room, and most of them were employees of the MBTA, and a couple of people from the public, like myself, who put my big boots on and went over. And I said, we need a do-over. This is unacceptable. You are not going to check this meeting off as having been done and then move on to the next thing. If you're going to have civil rights discussion in Roxbury, in what's now Nubian Square, how are you going to do it on a day like that when no one was going to show up? Right. And so we're looking for more community engagement, but also our groups like Green Justice Coalition, which ACE and T-Riders Union actually engaged this with, we're members of. We come out and bring the riders, and you saw during the fare increase kind of protests out in front of the building. Right. There were tons of people, so we bring people to those and organize and mobilize folks to get involved and to speak out. And
we should say you were successful in preventing a fare increase for the buses the last go around.
Oh, the little problem with that was, there's still a problem with that bus fare. The problem is that the bus fare had two fares. So if you pay cash on board, you had to pay more to ride the bus.
$2.
$2, right. But there was nowhere to refill your Charlie card, and there were no Charlie cards available in the bus-dependent areas of the city. And so they left that surcharge for paying cash on, and we had asked them to walk that back and take it off the bus. So if you weren't going to raise the fare and leave it at $170, that was only for people who had Charlie cards, and they didn't do that.
Partial victory,
Right.
but not really.
Right.
Let me ask you about the fare evasion story, which attracted a lot of attention this week when it was revealed that Governor Baker is proposing lowering the fines for fare evasion and making it illegal to arrest someone. A lot of people might have looked at that and said, well, how is that going to help stop fare evasion? What's your response to that proposal?
I don't think, my response is compare the cost of trying to enforce it to what we're losing with fare evasion. And they were making, it's sort of something anti-T riders, I think, from the car, because they wanted to make T riders the criminals, I feel. It's better to have it just a fine and not a criminal thing.
Oh, I see what you mean.
You know, it's, I think that was some bigotry against, they feel us T riders are getting too much of the public funds. And I think and sometimes when I see people get on back of Silver Line bus, they sometimes have a card, but it's so packed, they just want to get on the bus.
And that's a problem with a lot of commuters.
They're not really evading the fare.
Right, right.
The fines were so outrageous.
Which was what, $100 it said?
$100 for the first,
Yeah.
$300 for the second offense, for not paying $1.70 on the bus, and $600 for the third offense. So they had these outrageously high fines for fare evasion, even if it was a commuter rail fare. Let the fine fit the misdemeanor, which is not a crime. So we have been having conversations about that, and so what he said was, it would be between $10 and $250. Still, in his new iteration of the fine, the fines that would be out there, and I'm saying no, $250 for not paying a fare on the MBTA. If you didn't have the money in the first place, where are you getting $250, $300, $600? Or having your license taken away for not paying your fare on public transportation. So we're asking them not to have those outrageous fines for people, and also that it wasn't a crime, it was a misdemeanor, and it was unconstitutional for the transit police to come and try and enforce that, because the people had not committed a crime. And you can't say not paying your fare on the T should not be a crime.
So this is something the governor has proposed. The legislature has yet to consider it. I guess it's ultimately up to them to decide. You have any thoughts about that, Marvin?
Well, I just did what they both said. I mean, it is high. And in my experience, and I use the public transit a lot, I don't see that much cases of evasion, not clear anyway. When I see it on buses, it's usually students or young people who might come in through the back door. So what we're going to be charging them? I don't see a lot of folks like me.
Well, if you take the number of citations, I think there were 2,800 in 2018. You're talking 6 or 7 a day.
Yeah.
So, out of thousands of people.
Right,
That's
right.
not
So
really.
that's right. Yeah. And the confusing part about it, I would think, for a particular young person is when it's illegal, when this is not, because they often are told by the driver, somebody just get on, right? Then you have the green line, right? I just rode the green line this morning. So some people get no paying, like I did. Other people just got on, right? And it wasn't like they felt that they were evading the charge. A woman got on right behind me and went through the front door where the driver was and just went and sat down. The driver didn't say anything. So when is it? And so I think it doesn't send a clear message until we can figure out what that clear message is. That's one. But to criminalize folks or to charge those high fees, it just doesn't make any sense. Right. I don't think it's a real deterrent.
Do you think the possibility of having a low income, lower fare is a reality something that I attended one rally, people were calling for, if not free service, at least a lower fare for people. Is that something that is?
I sure hope so.
So we've been working on this for a while. Yeah, the MBTA has actually done some studies on it. MIT did a study prior to that in conjunction with the MBTA, and they realized that people who didn't have enough money to pay their fares, you know, to go, they were being stuck in the house, and they would have to make a decision between getting on the T or something else in their life. And the one thing that they usually cut out, according to the MIT study, was going to the doctor. And so you don't want people to have to make those horrible choices. So we're looking at discounted fares, a pass for a flat fee per month for up to 300% of the federal poverty level. So that's what we're asking for. And then we also want them to free the T. You know, make the T free. Even if it's free for the buses, there's ways of monitoring how many people are on there and seeing so on and so forth. You can redirect the money that you're spending to collect fares to do other things. And they make the T free just about every weekend on the Orange Line right now, open all the fare gates, take all the buses, and let people get on for free. So it's not a far-fetched kind of idea.
Considering the amount of money it takes to collect the fares to begin
Right.
with. And if you want more people to use mass transit, politically, is
A
this?
number of cities have already implemented this, you know.
Lawrence has a free bus service, and
Or even low fare. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, New York, a lot of places
Right,
have,
right.
a number of cities have done it.
so do you see that happening here? Do you see it a realistic chance of that happening?
I think so.
You do?
Yeah.
I believe it's going to happen, and the T is actually spending money and time and looking into it, and we've pushed for it, and we hope to see it soon,
Well,
sooner rather than later.
I want to thank all three of you for being with us today. You've been involved in this effort to make transit more affordable, more available for the people who really need it, who have no other option here in the city of Boston. So I want to thank you. Louise, your perfect attendance record at the FMCB. You should get a gold star. Louise Baxter from the T-Riders Union. And Mela Miles, always a pleasure to see you, who is now Director of Transit-Oriented Development at ACE.
And the T-Riders Union.
And the T-Riders Union. And Marvin Martin, Director of the Action for Equity Group. I want to thank you all for being with us here on Lunch Hour Live today, here from the Boston Public Library. And we come to you every month. The first Wednesday, we deal with transportation, and we think next month we're going to be talking about that big project at South Station, and and also work at North Station and Back Bay Station. Just a preview of the disruption the governor was talking about the other day, that a lot of commuters are going to have to face a really disruptive reality in the next few months, and I see you nodding in agreement. Thank you once again for watching, and thank you for joining us here at the Boston Public Library. I'm Bob Seay.